Coming up in today's episode.
The body never forgets. So if you don't heal yourself on a sub level, it will never forget what it's been through.
Welcome to episode 100 of Enter the Mind podcast, the most real talk, no nonsense podcast on the empowering of the mind. In today's episode, we're going to be interviewing wellness coach and consultant Julianne. Julianne, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Nice to see you guys.
Yeah, likewise. So we have a lot of really interesting stuff that we're going to get into today, like electricity of the body, vibrational stuff, nutrition. Before we get to that, though, Julianne, you have quite a story. So why don't you tell us how you got to where you are today?
Yeah, so I basically started off with a rough life. Nothing was handed to me, and it started pretty interesting from what I can remember, which was about 5 or 6 years old. My mom, she had a drug issue. It was really prescription pills, and so she started doing those heavily. And she would take mine and my sister's clothes and sell them, and she'd go in and steal things from grocery stores and clothes shops and stuff, and we basically resell them. So to get money, and then she'd give it to the drug dealer's daughter. So that was how she would get her drugs. And so that lasted for about a good year. I ended up ditching school a lot to go see to take care of my sister at home. And basically, I was her mom for about a year while my mom was either drunk or high off of whatever drug she was taking or whatever prescription drug she was taking. And when I was finally removed from her home, I went and lived with my dad. And it was for a while there, it was really mild, really good life. I lived with my grandma and my great grandma. And so it unfortunately took a turn when my dad got his own house when I was about 9 years old, and we moved away from all my grandparents, and he started doing heroin really bad and coke, and so unfortunately he wasn't meeting my needs. From I didn't have clean clothes to I didn't have food in the fridge to I remember he actually painted our basement black and was just down there all the time. So my interaction with him was very minimal. So I would end up going to the neighbor's house and eating with their families. And basically I was taken in by other people. And then about a year and a half in, my mom came back into the picture, and she took me back for a few months, about 6 or 8 months, I think, something like that. And I went and lived with her. She had just gotten out of a halfway house for drug abuse, and I don't know what else she was doing. But she started living with this guy. They separated. And then my mom, I guess it must have been a thing of hers, but she was actually prostituting herself out in order to make ends meet. And so that was how we would get our shelters. So sometimes it would be a motel, sometimes a hotel. But when we were unfortunate enough to not get any money, we'd sleep under bridges, we'd panhandle, we'd sleep behind people's houses. So it got pretty rough. And that lasted for, like I said, about 6 to 8 months. I can't remember the exact timeline. And then I went back with my dad for a little bit. And my dad had gotten even deeper in his dark place. And so I, unfortunately, it got really bad to the point where I had a cousin come stay with us, and she ended up molesting me. And then my dad ended up molesting her. And that was pretty much what halted everything, because my stepmom stepped in and said, listen, if somebody doesn't take her out of this environment, she is not going to survive. She is literally going to either die or something, she's going to get pregnant or something bad's going to happen. I don't know how I maintained my kind of mindset. It was really, I think, just kind of maybe keeping with religion, because that was what my grandma had taught me, was really to be close to God and talk to him when times were really tough. And I think that's what I really turned to. Because that was all I had to hold on to. But once I was removed from that environment, I went and lived with my grandma and her, and my grandpa. And I unfortunately never had exactly the best relationship with other kids. One, because I was Hispanic, but I look very white, so that always was a bad kind of fit for me. So I always got picked on. If I was with the Hispanics, it was like, oh, it was a little white girl. And when I was with when I was with the white kids, unfortunately, I was blamed for like stealing stuff. So this is when I was in school with my grandma and grandpa that I actually got blamed for stealing a purse, and I didn't do it, but because of who I was, I guess, is where that kind of negated where they blamed me for something. And it ended up pushing me to decide, all right, listen, I want to be involved in school. You guys, like, this isn't fair to me. So I actually publicly transported myself into another school, and that was how I finished off. Is I went to one school for a couple of years before my grandma and grandpa got divorced, and I did really well. I was getting A's. I had made honor roll. And then my grandma and grandpa got divorced, and I went to John F. Kennedy where I would graduate. And I graduated doing very well. I was an A student. I was involved in pretty much everything I could be involved in. I loved being in drama. Maybe it's because my whole life I felt like I had to be somebody else. And so really that was how I ended my high school years. I was the first one to graduate from high school and the first one to go to college, which I am proud to say that I did get my bachelor's in psychology, but I have studied other things along the way. I did have a little bit of a hiccup where I met the wrong guy, and unfortunately, it was an emotional and physical abuse for a little while there. I think it was just a background history of thinking you could fix somebody that you really can't. So that was a lesson learned. But I did have my first daughter with him, and she really put me back on track. I wanted to do right by her and excel in this lifetime for her and do whatever I could to be the best mom I possibly could, because I didn't want to be a repeat of my mom and dad. So, which I have to say thank you. They did not. They kind of led me away from doing drugs and alcohol. I didn't ever touch that stuff, just out of fear of falling into the same traps. So that pretty much sums up my life in a very quick nutshell.
First, want to acknowledge, what a story. Some very heavy stuff that you went through. But I know there's listeners out there that have gone through similar things. So I appreciate you sharing the story and being a great example of resilience and resourcefulness and really excelling through difficult situations.
Yeah, I mean, it's awesome to know that it's possible and that we're not a product of what we're said we're going to be.
I just wanted to ask 2 questions, and I wanted to know, so what did you dream to be when you were young? And did you ever think that growing up in the childhood that you did, that you would be this happy and successful?
So I actually, when I was younger, I dreamt that I was going to be a doctor. And amazingly enough, I'm completing my naturopathic doctorate. So it's a little bit different than your typical doctor, but I am going to finish that and I'll be able to sit on the boards to actually get my degree in naturopathics. So that is coming up here. I guess I didn't envision that was ever going to come true at some point. I thought like, oh my gosh, I'm so far from being able to accomplish that. And then when I was able to take control of my own life and I was in high school and I started doing really well with my grades and stuff, I was like, all right, I think I could do this. Like I could be that. And then I didn't agree with some of the Western medicine, and I was like, am I in the wrong field? Is this wrong for me? And then it just took me where I had to find the right place and the right journey and what spoke to my heart. And then from there, I've been relentless. So.
Hey, gang. Well, that's very interesting. I love that too because, I wanted to be a brain surgeon when I was young. So it turns out I'm a brain surgeon, but I surgeon on the brain, metaphorically. So I love how things work out like that. And I'm happy that you got into, the right like doctorate thing for you. Um,
Yeah.
and then my second one that I was really curious about is, I guess I have like two more, but when your mom had taken your clothes and sold them or gave them to somebody else's daughter, were you like conscious enough or aware enough to be like, that hurts me? Or were you more like, kind of like indifferent to it? Like you didn't really know what was going on?
No, that actually hurt because I didn't see my dad very often during that time, and he would buy me clothes, and they'd be beautiful little outfits and stuff, and I used to just take so much pride in them. And then I'd watch somebody else's little girl get them. And so it was very conscious in my mind that it was like, wow, and it wasn't the material items, it was more the connection to my father. And as she was giving them away, that I was like, how awful is that? Like, who would do that to their own kid? So.
What age was that? How old were you then?
I was 6.
Wow, 6. So you were, yeah, you were definitely conscious enough to be like, that hurts.
Yeah.
Now, because it just seems like really like how harsh your childhood was to you, and how you just seem to not really see yourself as any sort of victim. Like it just seems that you kept pushing for like more. You were like, well, I'm going to put myself back in school. And like
Yeah.
that's, to have those kinds of thoughts with everything that you have gone through. So that mindset that you were talking about, you got from praying.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And just, I think at the end of the day is forgiveness too. Like, it's amazing. People don't realize how forgiveness can also hinder you, but actually help you. So I look back and I'm like, thank you, mom and dad, because if you didn't do what you did to me, I wouldn't be the person I am today. I wouldn't have the kids I have today. I wouldn't be the mom I am today. And I wouldn't be the wife. What it did is it made me show up. And because of that, it goes back to, I love what Robert said, resilience. Like I learned to be thankful, and I learned to go with the flow of things and just turn to God and pray and say, please, I know that you have a plan for me. I'm not giving up faith. Just help me through this right now in order to not give up faith. So I did have to ask for prayer, or ask for that help. But nonetheless, I just found it. Like, it was like, I need this because there's nobody else out there that's going to help me get there if I don't survive these moments. Like, I mean, my dad wasn't going to show up all of a sudden for me. My mom wasn't going to, change. And my mom actually died when I was 15 due to her vices. She died in a car accident, a horrific one. They were drinking and driving, and she wasn't wearing a seatbelt. She flew through the windshield and snapped her vertebrae in half. So she died on instant impact. I didn't find out for about 4 months because she had so many different identities because she had been married so many times that they didn't know who she originally was. So to put that in perspective, sometimes your vices will catch up with you, and not in a good way. So.
Wow. And if you don't mind me asking, is your dad still alive?
He is, but he actually just this last year got into a horrific accident. I think he was probably still. I know from other people that he's still doing drugs, and I think he was probably on drugs when it happened, and he lost control of his car and ended up under a trash truck, and he is now paralyzed from the waist down. So.
Wow. Have you spoken to him since that happened? Has it changed anything in his mind?
He's been a little more present, but I think he's kind of fallen off the wagon again. But I have talked to him. I was there during his hospital visits. I was actually there when he was unconscious, praying for him, hoping that he would get through this, and that hopefully he'd understand how valuable his life was and to make a change when he actually came to. So I'm hoping that I'm wrong, but I haven't talked to him in a little bit, and I think it's one of those things where sometimes you have to disattach yourself from people that are toxic like that in order to survive yourself. So that's one of the things I had to let him go, but I do think about him, and I pray still for him, and I hope that he keeps on track. So
Good. That is amazing.
I will say that what actually led me to be a health and wellness coach is I was diagnosed with fibromyalgia. If people don't realize how much stress takes a toll on your body, it does. And usually some of your autoimmune diseases could be linked back very easily to stress that you house in your body that it never lets go of. And when you can't find ways to get rid of that, it does take its toll, and you start finding illnesses. And fibromyalgia is one of the things that is linked back to stress. So high levels of stress have been linked to fibromyalgia, which is basically pain all over your body. And that pretty much led me down my journey of wanting to fix myself, but not with band-aids, but actually like things that helped me. And because the doctor said, well, here's a prescription. And me having that past history with my mom doing drugs and misusing prescription drugs, that was not going to be the route I took. And so that really took me down a different journey in my life. And I tried to get pregnant with my third kiddo, and I did get pregnant, but I miscarried, and I couldn't figure out why. So it was kind of one of those things where I didn't understand that. But I had been trying for years. And once I got my body better and I put myself back on track and I started nutritionally looking at things and also looking at things on a frequency level, I realized that these are all things that can be fixed. And I ended up getting pregnant again about 2.5 years ago. And I ended up getting pregnant with twins. So it is possible. And sometimes when you ask for something, you get double. So be careful.
Yeah, well, congratulations on that.
Thank you.
And this is a great segue into the physiology side of our conversation. So I first want to ask about this chronic stress concept, because you said that the chronic stresses can cause a lot of illnesses, the autoimmune stuff. How would someone know if they're at a dangerously high level of chronic stress as opposed to, oh, I'm at a level of acceptable stress because I go to work, I have a job, I'm going to encounter problems, I'm a little stressed about how to solve these problems at work. How do you know the difference between that versus like chronic stress that's capable of causing illnesses?
So usually by the time you hit that kind of level of stress, it's one of those moments where it's hard to get out of bed. And it's like you wake up every day and you're in pain and you just don't know how you're going to face the day. And you have that negative rumination that constantly goes through your mind. And sometimes people assume that once they've passed their childhood or whatever trauma they've dealt with and they feel like they've overcome it, they don't realize that the body never forgets. So if you don't heal yourself on a sub level, it will never forget what it's been through. And so what it does is it pretty much houses everything in there in a little, like, you know how women always say, I just stuff it in there and I just keep stuffing. And so it's like, well, that's great and all, but there's a level to which that stuffing will actually hurt you instead of help you. So like sometimes you can use some of that stress that helps propel you forward. And then other times that stress will start actually taking its toll on you. And when you really start to see that, it's like, I can't get out of bed, like negative rumination. You're just tired all the time. Like you feel like all you've been doing is working for days. And you're like, I can't understand. I can't enjoy my kids to the fullest. Like there's so many things that once you peak out, you start seeing, and your body literally starts feeling pain. From rheumatoid arthritis to all kinds of stuff. And like the funny thing is it's not just food that actually causes that, because people also don't realize food is a link to that. So between food and what you're telling yourself and what you're feeling every day and how you're not addressing those issues is where everything that frequency starts breaking you down on a very like low, depressed level. And then you just basically become unable to do stuff. Like anxiety is at its height. You're not sleeping. I mean, it just really, anything you could think of, there's definitely a link between stress and food. And you can even, I mean, there are ways to test that out. You can start, if you start doing cleanses and stuff and you start really getting down to that level, your body will start detoxing. And let me tell you something. I went through a cleanse where I reset my body and I cleansed so hard, I might as well have been a drug addict because I was like, oh my gosh, this is real. I was like, I just want a hamburger. Like, somebody give me a hamburger. Like, I couldn't believe what had come over me. And I'm like, what is going on? There was foods I was craving that I didn't even like. I'm like, why do I want this? But what was so amazing about it is when I started detoxing, I also emotionally started going through stuff. And it's weird when you start kind of going through those deep, dark places, you start pulling up stuff that you're like, oh, okay. And it's amazing because it's almost like your body is starting to let go of the things that you've done to it or that has been done to it. And so it's really amazing to kind of go through those journeys. So that's pretty much why we started. That's one of the things that we offer in our program is a cleanse, because it's helping you reset your body on that level so that you can both detox from some of the foods that you've been putting in it, but also from the emotions that have been going on.
Yeah, I definitely remember when I went on a cleanse. First of all, I was a healthy girl, but I did do a lot of drugs. So when I did do that cleanse, oh my God, it felt like there was a pole going through my body, like turning with spikes on it. Like I was in so much pain. And the more that I continued to really put like good stuff into my body and like fill my body with good stuff, the more I guess that I kind of broke down and like really, really cried for my body. Like, wow, like how could I have treated my body so bad? And those deep rooted psyche pain comes up when you cleanse your body. I definitely, yeah, believe in this. Full fledged. I don't know what it is.
Yeah, no, it's amazing. A lot of people will go through that journey where they'll start detoxing, not just like physically, but it's an emotional detox, and it can get kind of a little sketchy there. So
So when you have a client and they need to do this cleanse detox because they're dealing with very high levels of stress, and you can see it because they've got these physical illnesses, what are some of the first steps that you take with these clients?
So, my husband does more of the coaching side, and he helps them kind of find those areas, which we do like this circle of life thing where you get to address. We ask you on specific topics like what's being fed to its fullest and what could be worked on. And so that's really one of our first approaches. But then I also will do diagnostic testing. So I have a couple different machines that do like a frequency pickup on you, and they're non-invasive. They just kind of pick up what's going on in your body and what your body's projecting through basically a frequency. And it feeds back information to me. So I have multiple machines, but one of them is more like it talks about, it gives me information on what minerals and amino acids and stuff that you are actually deficient in. And so then I can actually tell you, like, this is what you're going to need to take to kind of start getting your body back up to that optimal level. And we'll test about every month to see where it's at. And you literally start seeing things change and things fall off. So where there's no longer this issue because now you've been taking this supplement for it. And so that also tells me how much I should give you. So I usually make everybody start at a very bare minimum where it's like what any practitioner would tell you to start at, basic. And then because I can see where your body is fluctuating, I can tell you, all right, this is still very low. Let's increase dose on this to a little bit more. So that's one machine. Another machine will actually tell me if there's any cellular misfunction in the body. So if there's something actually going on where there could be some chronic illness occurring. And usually in the gut. So the funny thing is the gut, it has a lot of things like serotonin. that's produced there, which is also helps with hormones. So when you're not feeding it right and you're depressed, it basically your emotional status goes down. Like you're taxed, and your gut, it like doesn't feel good. Usually you have IBS, you could have SIBO, you can have just any gut inflammation. And that all occurs just due by food and stress. It's amazing how much, because what happens is when you eat something that doesn't agree with you, you have your gut fissures in your stomach that are normally very closely aligned. And then when you start eating stuff that doesn't agree with you, which can even be healthy food, because if you're stressed and you are not in a good state, it can actually cause these fissures. And what happens is because of that, the food particles get through, and then it gets into your bloodstream. And then that's where you have like the, sorry, cat. That's where you have like antibodies and stuff that starts flaring up, and you start having things come in and target it. And it's like, this is an invasion in the body. Please get rid of it. And so then you have other issues, and it could be something as simple as broccoli or spinach, where somebody's like, this is so healthy for you, I eat it all the time. But now it's become your worst enemy. And it's one of the things that actually is creating more inflammation in your body when you keep eating it. So the machine that I have will tell me foods that don't agree with you. It'll tell me basically where there's kind of that deficiency. If there is something that's on your radar from a disease or something, it pretty much gives me feedback and tells me what I can do. I can treat it on my machine. I can give you a tincture, things like that. And it basically gives back some personal information on you,
And
but
these
on an
machines,
internal level.
and you said these machines are non-invasive, so
Yeah, not invasive.
and they don't use, because I'm familiar with like blood work maybe telling you about nutrient deficiencies, but how do these machines work if they don't puncture your skin or?
So like I said, it's all frequency based, because we all have this level of frequency that we give off. If you ever stand close to somebody and you're like, let's say it's somebody that's really mean, because that's where you feel the energy. Like you're like, oh, this guy does not, or gal does not feel good to me. Like you just automatically know. Well, we all give off frequency. So does the plants, the life outside. That's why they say grounding is such a wonderful thing, because you actually get in balance with your environmental stuff. And so what it does is it picks up all the frequencies off of what your skin is actually giving off. So it's like the oils in your skin, everything. I could take a hair follicle and tell you exactly what you're deficient in and what you should probably not be eating because it's not agreeing with your body at this moment. And then the great thing is there's also a cool machine called the Rife machine that actually will, that I can actually treat with frequencies as well. And it sends out like these, it's basically different pitches of noise. It's a German made machine. It's been around forever, but it's not, they don't like to recognize it as well. But see, on a cellular level, if you send out these frequencies, it will make it to where cancer and certain cells that have this almost negative environment, it'll start actually sending frequencies to it that kill it off, because it makes it in an inhospitable environment. And basically it just kills it. And that's exactly what, like, you can do it with multiple ways, but the Rife machine is great. And like I said, the other machine that I have, it does the same thing. It picks up frequencies for certain things, and it can do the same thing where it sends out frequencies that'll pretty much just make things inhospitable for the things that are going on in your body. And if you got to keep it up, it's not something like you do it a few treatments and then it, like, because everything it takes a while to get rid of. I mean, I always tell people, especially with nutrition, I'm like, it takes a minute to heal, because think about it. If you're 30, 40, 50 years old and you've been treating your body like that for that long, you expect like an overnight sensation. Don't, because it's going to take you a couple months, maybe a few months before your body actually says, yep, this environment is no longer accepting whatever's going on out here to come into it anymore. So it takes a minute, but you can get it all reset. And, for women that, the interesting thing is a lot of women out there, I've heard so many women come to me and they're like, I'm trying to get pregnant, but I can't, or I've miscarried this many times. And it's like, okay, well, I can probably give you some insight in nutrition. I can give you some insight in some maybe supplements, and I also do auricular therapy, which is it's a little pulse tool, which is very similar to acupuncture, but instead of actually poking you with needles, I send frequencies through this machine, and it is electrical charge, so you do get a little like tinging there, but I'll do it in the ears and on the body, and you can actually hone in on certain hormones and stuff and activate them. So it's actually quite interesting. I love that machine. That tool more than anything. And I'm not saying that I've done anything to help with COVID issues, but I actually have had people come back to me with high success rate when I've treated them with it. So it's a pretty amazing tool.
Now, what I wanted to add in, just so everybody knows, is that when Julianne was talking about the hair follicle, it's not in the government. Like, you don't get put in the government system, and that's what I think a lot of people would find beneficial, because I know that I was really happy, because I know that, I want to fix stuff in my body, but I really don't want, myself in the database of the government more than I already am. So I think that that's a really big plus with Julianne. And then I also wanted to comment on the fact that I love, love, love. I'm literally on the complete same page with you about if it doesn't have anywhere to thrive, it cannot thrive. And like you said as well, if it doesn't, it's not like a quick fix. You have to keep going back, because the host, it's still alive in your body. And it's like negative thoughts as well. So if you have a host for negative thoughts in your mind, guess what? They're going to go to the host. And once you starve that host, once you starve that thing that is screaming and kicking and crying to be fed, eventually she's gonna go to sleep. It's gonna lie dormant, because it has nothing to thrive off of, nothing to feed off of. And that's like straight up science. It happens in the body, like Julianne is explaining so well and clearly, and it happens in the mind. And yeah, I just had to add that in, because that is, oh my God, I love that.
Which is why we do the wheel of life, because we address those outside issues. Because if you're negatively thinking about stuff, or you're not exercising or doing other things to feed your body, you are going to allow those cellular, misdevelops to happen in your body. Whether that is like where you're going to feed your body with negative thoughts, and then all of a sudden you're going to have that autoimmune disease. Like, people are like, oh my gosh, I don't want to get sick like my mom or my dad. They had rheumatoid arthritis, and they just keep ruminating over it. And then one day they get diagnosed with it, and they're like, see, I told you it was going to happen. And it's so not true. It's because, a lot of times you think that negative thoughts, just like stress, it negatively lays dormant in there. And if you keep ruminating over it, you allow your body to become susceptible to those things that will make you sick to that level.
Whew.
Yeah, this is great stuff. In this podcast, we talk a lot about frequencies and trying to raise your frequency if it's low, and what frequency you're giving off and things like that. And so from this conversation, it's kind of clear that yes, your thoughts do affect your frequency, but also the food that you consume affects your frequency. Now, in terms of food, the question I had, it doesn't sound like there's a common offender, like a cause of these toxins, because you were saying somebody could eat broccoli and it could still upset their system. So are there common offending foods, or does it really vary from person to person?
So there are some foods that tend to be high on people's radar. Gluten is one of them, because there is the element of gliadin in it, which is pretty much like you're eating grass. So our bodies were not meant to digest grass. So that's a level to which you're like, oh my gosh, I'm not going to go outside and graze on my grass and then try and like see if my body will be able to digest it down. So a lot of people have an issue with actually being able to digest gluten. And the thing is like some people are celiac and they know that they can't have gluten, or some people are gluten sensitive, which is really interesting because gluten sensitive can have very similar issues as celiac and sometimes worse, but it's untestable. Like, so that's what's so crazy is you can get tests done and a lot of times they can't actually tell you have gluten issues because it comes back as gluten sensitive, or it actually usually doesn't even come back as that. And so people are like, I have all these issues, and they go into their doctor and their doctor's like, well, you don't have gluten problems, so I don't know what's going on. So, and then sometimes dairy, because of the casein in the dairy, it's hard for the body to break down the dairy products. And that's not true for everybody. But really what happens with that is you have to be careful where you're getting that product of milk from. It's best to go with the A2s and the organics, because the problem is that then you're getting hormones. And in the more hormones you're putting in your body, the worse off you're kind of offsetting your own hormones. So that's the other thing. Like people have thyroid issues at an elevated rate today. And what's amazing with that is a lot of that can lead back to food, where there's hormones being put in our food. And so it's really interesting to kind of see these little elements. But that's another one that is a little bit more on the side that you want to stay clear of. Corn, not a great one to be eating. It has a lot of glyphosates in it. You can't find clean corn out there. So with that being said, even organic corn, because the way it's grown, it still has the capability for the environmental toxins to still become attached to those actual corn fern or whatever you want to call it. So, and then you also have soy, which in the United States, we do not have any soy that is actually organic and in its natural state. And so a lot of it is synthetic. And with that, there's a lot of synthetic hormones that are given back to the body. And a lot of people end up having issues with that. And then you see things like, unfortunately, men that have boobs. So, things like that, where you can actually see where that's happening. Or you get women that are estrogen dominant, and then they start having endometriosis. So there are some foods that I'd highly recommend you can take them out and then start adding them back in and see, because if you take them out for at least 21 days and then you start to add it back in, you will see that body trigger.
So I might buy, a gluten-free, like Amy's frozen dinner from Whole Foods, right? And I feel good after eating it. And I look at the box and it says gluten-free. And I think, oh, well, maybe gluten is my issue, right? So then next day, go out to lunch to Subway, and I get, a hearty multigrain foot-long sandwich. I eat it. I'm like, I feel bloated. And I'm like, maybe it was the gluten. Like the bread has gluten in it. Like maybe that was it, right? So then that evening, I'll go to Trader Joe's and I'll buy the gluten-free mac and cheese. Come home, eat that. And I'm like, dang, I feel stuffed. Like, what the hell? Like, this has no gluten in it. And so I wonder if other people have the same stories, but like, am I going about it the wrong way? Like, how quickly do you have to monitor? Is it only the 3 hours after? Like, when you say 21 days, I'm like, oh man, how do you troubleshoot this stuff if you have to monitor for 21 days?
Yeah, so the 21 days thing, it's like you cut out, like Julianne was saying, like the corn, the gluten, the soy. You really focus on putting like real vegetables in your body, etc. And when you come out of the 21 days, you first reintroduce gluten and you see how your body starts to react. Are you crazy bloated? Are you tired? Are you angry even? Are you irritable? And then maybe like a week and a half later, you add in soy and you take the gluten out or something like that. But doing it like this, you can really start to see what is giving you abs, or what is giving you acne, or what is making you feel bloated, or what is making you feel irritable. It's not easy, but it's fun, it's a challenge, and it's really helpful.
Yeah. And it's amazing. Your skin actually tells a lot about what you're eating. So people don't like, people are like, I have acne so bad, or I have like this rosacea or something. And it's like, if you were to try and test that out, your skin starts clearing up. So sugar is another thing. Like sugar, that feeds cancer. Like people, what's so amazing is like people don't realize, like if you go to the doctor and you have cancer, the first thing they tell you to cut out is sugar, because it will literally feed the cells of the cancer. They thrive off of it. But anyway, so yeah, so skin is one of your telltale signs. Sometimes you can have sensitivity to sulfur. When I first started the cleanse and I started adding food back in, I ended up trying eggs. And eggs have high sulfur in them, chicken eggs. And I was breaking out, and I'm like, oh my gosh. And what's so funny is I had acne all the way until I was, until a few years ago when I decided to do the cleanse. And I was like, oh my gosh, look at my face. I feel great. This is awesome. I don't know what it was like to not have acne. And then I turned around and ate some eggs, and I was like, oh my God, I have acne again. So it was like a quick learning lesson, but it's amazing because your skin, if you have like rashes, hives, things like that, that automatically tells you that there is something going on, that it's probably a food that you're eating that's sending off that. And you can test it out. You could try a 7-day where you go without bread or something, or gluten, and you can give it a shot. Sometimes you could get a response, but it depends on how bad you are with gluten. So like if your basic like food category consists of gluten all the time, because people do, they have it for breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and you're like, oh my gosh, I can't give up bread. What are you talking about? I gotta have my sandwiches and my bagel or my cereal. So there's an issue there, because then you will have probably you're going to need to detox from it longer in order to see if that is actually what's bothering you, because your body, it takes a while for it to forget or at least heal from what you've put in it. So if you're eating gluten all the time, it's not going to be like, oh, fixed. You stopped eating gluten for like 7 days? Probably not. You're probably not going to see, you could see a little bit of a difference to where if you ate again some gluten, that you will have a small, like maybe you're bloated. But like Kyra said, like what's amazing is people don't realize anxiousness, anger, things like that, they all stem from food too. So when people are like, I don't know why I'm so damn irritable, but people are getting on my nerves, it could definitely be what you're eating.
Sometimes I'll just go crazy on vegan junk food because I don't always know how to make it. So maybe I'm eating like a steak sandwich here, right? It's made out of like wheat gluten. Then I go and eat some mac and cheese. I eat another sandwich, and like a week later, I realize that I'm just kind of like angry. I'm just like pissed off. I'm like, nobody talk to me because I have a bunch of shit in my body and I don't want to talk. So, yeah, I definitely feel that that the foods can make you aggravated. It's so interesting.
Yeah, it is.
One of my thoughts is coming back to this issue of the timing. Like people buy their groceries like once a week, so I could see people. I've done it where I'm like, well, maybe milk is not good for me. I'm not going to buy milk this week and see what happens. And it's a good intention, right? You're trying to experiment, but like it sounds like 1 week is not going to give you the answer.
It, like I said, it depends on how quickly your body is, like, how bad are you? Like, how bad is your state of well-being? Are you in like full-blown rheumatoid arthritis? Are you in full-blown fibromyalgia? More than likely, 7 days is not going to give you the answer. It's not going to be long enough for you to find out what exactly is triggering it, if not all of the above. So you've really got to do the 21 days to get that full idea and concept of what's going on. And then you start adding stuff back in. And so, like, let's say you do eat broccoli, though. And, like, every time you eat broccoli, or at least majority of every time you eat broccoli, you're like, oh, my God, my pants don't fit. I'm gassy. Like, please clear the room out. You probably want to stop eating that for a little bit. Give your body a little bit of time to reset. But the problem that you're running into is that if you are responding to gluten, and you haven't eliminated the gluten, but you have taken out the broccoli, you could see a small time frame to which you do really well with it. But because you have those gut fissures, those basically the little holes inside your lining, it's going to get through again. And so it's just a temporary fix to something that needs to be completely healed. So that's why, unfortunately, I like to say that, sure, you can do 7 days. You might see a little bit of a difference, but if you're not doing it all at once, or at least trying to do the 21 days for at least one of those products, then you're not going to see the full benefits. Because if something else is causing it, then you're really going to keep running into the same issue. And so the problem is like, it's a good temporary fix, but then in the long run, it will come back. And so that's why I always tell people, go see a nutritionist, go see, well, at least somebody that does more of that holistic approach, or go see somebody that knows more about food. I'd like to say some of our doctors do, but that's not always the case. There are plenty of doctors out there that I don't think they have enough schooling in the nutritional department, and there are some that do. They really have dedicated their lives to it. So if you are looking for a little help on that journey, there's always some great people to go see. If you're in Colorado, you can come see us.
Yeah, how would people find out more information about you?
Yeah, so if you're looking more for the coaching side, we have a couple different links, but the www.365wellness.health will be our coaching and consulting link. You can find out a little bit more. You can put in some information about yourself and what's going on, and then we'll contact you back. We'll address some of what you're looking at, and then go from there. We have our e-commerce site, which is the Wellness Shop 365 at gmail.com. So you can go there for more information on, I'm sorry, I knew I was going to say that wrong. www.thewellnessshop365.com. Sorry, I knew I was going to say that wrong. And that will give you product information. And we are actually building our packages on that site so you can see, because I'm going to do treatment stuff. I'm building that in right now. I'm more on I talk to people, I tell them how much I charge, and they've started coming in. But since I've been working with Grant Cardone and we're really starting to build on that, I'm like, all right, so I need to build my packages and really get that going. So I've been more honed in on the personal health and that, because that's my passion. So I've had to really step outside of the realm and learn how to build up that back portion of the business. So that's a new journey for me. But we are actually creating an interactive website as well, which should be up actually by next week. And it's my365wellness.com. So you can actually go on there and do the Wheel of Life and put in kind of where you stand, and then it'll pop back information for you on maybe you need a little bit of a push because you're a little lagging there. So, but those are some ways to get in contact with us and find out a little bit more about us. And we do, like I said, we do every arena. So we address nutrition, mental focus, what are you feeding yourself on the outside, as far as spirituality, family. Are you cooking at home? Are you hanging out with friends? What does your relationships look like? Because those are all so important, because they're also going to feed you as well.
So can you say again the two different, sounded like there were two websites.
Yep. So the 365wellness.health is actually the consult that we consult with you. And then the interactive one is my365wellness.com, which is more you put in some information, you get some feedback. It's a free tool for you to kind of see where you're at and kind of go from there. And just kind of get some more personal information for yourself. We're also going to probably put up a little manual book on some foods that, like the gluten and stuff, some negativity on that. And then what alternatives you could use if you really need an alternative to that. I'll be the first to admit I had a gluten issue. I grew up with it. It's unfortunately called the poor man's meat for a reason, because it was fed to me all the time. And that was one of the hardest things to give up. I ate that. I finished a sourdough bread in 3 days from California. So if that doesn't tell you how bad that could be, all by myself, by the way, nobody else got a piece of that.
Gotcha.
Nobody touching my bread. Oh.
I've been there too. I'm a fan of sourdough. All right, so again, Julianne, thank you so much for joining and sharing all of the wealth of knowledge today.
Yeah, thank you guys. I'm so humbled and appreciate you having me on the show, and sorry I went a little over.
It's all good. Did you find at least one gold nugget in today's episode? Then please like and subscribe and share it with a friend. And finally, if you're looking for a community of like-minded people, join our free Facebook group at facebook.com/groups/enterthemind.